comprehensive look on SBF. Fake it until you make it is something we all heard about. And we all know a lot of examples of people who faked it, then made it, then lost it all. When researching about Sam Bankman-Fried, aka SBF, I can't help but think that maybe he was faking it until he made it. I thought that was the best, shortest description to describe who SBF is. However, the more I read about SBF, the more I realized he is different. That maybe he didn't fake it till he made it. That it was not as simple as I thought it would be. Far from faking it. That SBF was a different type of a founder. Which is the reason why I think he was able to convince a lot of investors to put their money on his business. SBF looked very different and far from the so many Silicon Valley founder fakers that made headlines in the recent years. SBF was not the same as, let's say, the founder of Theranos, Elizabeth Holmes, who faked it and made it. Holmes faked it so hard she even had to change her voice deep and low to sound strong and to sound with authority. As I go through with you the information I gathered, you'll see later on that maybe SBF is that person who strongly believed that he was doing something good, even if in the eyes of the established norms, he wasn't. So, let me start. Chapter 1. A speedrun of the SBF story. SBF was born on March 6, 1992 on the campus of Stanford University. Born to prominent liberal academic parents who are also professors at Stanford Law School. His parents were major influences. Both are Stanford law professors who are well-known advocates for social equity. Michael Lewis, author of the new book about Bankman-Fried, told the BBC he believes the entrepreneur simply saw cryptocurrency as a means to make money to change the world. SBF showed an astonishing aptitude for math puzzles at an early age. SBF attended Canada-USA Math Camp, a summer program for mathematically talented high school students. He attended high school at Crystal Springs Uplands School in Hillsborough, California. He graduated from MIT in 2014 with a bachelor's degree in physics and a minor in mathematics. While studying, he was reportedly considering a career in animal welfare, having organized a protest against factory farming in his first year of college. Through this, SBF met with Will MacAskill, one of the movement's leaders and one of the originators of effective altruism, who told SBF that he could make more of an impact by finding a career that paid well, and then donating money to charity. This is known as earning to give, and it's one of the central pillars of effective altruism, a movement that seeks to do good by using resources effectively. Take note as this part is important in SBF's story from his rise to his downfall. SBF started his career in 2013 as an intern at Jane Street Capital after graduating at MIT, a proprietary trading firm specializing in international exchange traded funds, and in addition, they only get smart people. This is where SBF acquired his first work experience by working there full-time. In November 2017, SBF co-founded the trading firm Alameda Research, where he briefly worked as a development director. In April 2019, SBF founded the cryptocurrency FTX, which started operating the following month. He launched FTX in 2019 and grew it into one of the leading exchanges for buying and selling crypto derivatives. In early 2022, investors valued FTX and its US operations at a combined $40 billion. Early during this point, however, there's a few people already having concerns about the possible connections between FTX and Alameda Research. Later, Bankman-Fried poured hundreds of millions into mainstream marketing, including the naming rights to an esport team, TSM, and Miami Heat's arena. The FTX logo suddenly started appearing almost everywhere where everyone can see. Popular athletes and people started endorsing FTX, and there was a point when SBF was rubbing shoulders with big names such as Tony Blair and Bill Clinton. SBF wasn't done in sports and pop culture. SBF also entered the political sphere. Bankman-Fried was the second largest billionaire donor to Democratic causes in 2022 midterm elections, giving nearly $40 million. However, not everything was as it seems. Some people started speculating where all the money from these endorsements, advertisements, and promotions came from. Some people also didn't see SBF's political moves and appearances in Washington as something for crypto in general, but instead, it was more for himself and FTX. This is where the house of cards started to fall. Last year, November, CoinDesk reported that a significant portion of Alameda's assets were held in FTT token, the exchange's token issued by FTX. Basically, the report was saying that FTX's riches is mostly based on the internet money they themselves printed. From here, weeks after the report, SBF was reported to be desperately attempting to raise money for FTX. Seems not everything was going great for FTX, despite SBF tweeting everything is fine. Failure was imminent for FTX. While all this was happening for FTX, SBF was having an online fight with CZ, the big boss of Binance. Changpeng CZ Zhao, the CEO of cryptocurrency exchange firm Binance, announced just days before the bankruptcy filing that Binance would be selling its FTT tokens due to alarming trends in the balance sheet of companies tied to Bankman-Fried. This scared all types of people involved with FTX, from the investors to the traders and to the simple hodlers. And so, the sell-off began. The bank run happened and FTX was losing money, and losing fast. Quick note, many people say that CZ's move was one smart business tactical move and so on, and I kind of agree with that look. However, we should not also forget the fact that SBF placed himself in this situation at the first place. All this would not have happened had he, SBF, had a board of adults overseeing things and helping him with the risks. But FTX didn't have them. SBF didn't have anybody telling him, bruh, that might be a bad move. Going back to the story, Binance, being the biggest crypto exchange in the world, offered to purchase FTX. However, on November 9, Binance announced it would no longer buy FTX, saying it had arrived at that decision as a result of corporate due diligence. It also cited regulatory investigations and reports of mishandled funds. In between this moment until his arrest, SBF went on an interview spree, joining Twitter Spaces, talking to the media, and internet personalities. He gave out so much interview, one can't help but think either he was trying to mold a narrative where he did nothing wrong, or that he really is just not that smart. Because in this situation, he should have kept quiet because whatever he said in those interviews were gonna be used against him during his trial. Bankman-Fried was arrested on December 12, 2022, a month after FTX's collapse. Charges brought against him per the Justice Department were 2 counts of wire fraud and 1 count of conspiracy to commit money laundering, conspiracy to commit commodities fraud, conspiracy to commit securities fraud, and conspiracy to defraud the United States and commit campaign finance violations. Chapter 2: The Warning Signs. In retrospect, I think it is safe to claim now that those things SBF did, which were very open for the public to witness, were warning signs, early red flags. Surprisingly, few people actually caught these red flags, but chose to remain silent for lack of evidence and the fact that SBF was the media's darling, and that he was now playing with politicians. We now know that these people were right to cast doubts all along. In a Bloomberg feature in SBF, when a venture capitalist tried to explain to SBF the moral implications of starting FTX and having ties to Alameda, that VC realized it was too much and that he couldn't possibly make a deal with SBF. The venture capitalist said SBF was just wide open when he tried to explain things, adding, "It was almost like trying to explain Business Ethics 101 to a baby." In this part of the video, I am not claiming that other people who portray the same behavior mentioned here are just like SBF. However, it won't also hurt to raise some eyebrows and be a doubting Thomas to a certain degree if you feel like something is way too good to be true, or that if a person is way too ideal to be seen as an authentic and sincere person. So, here are the following signs that should have triggered the alarm bells for many people. First red flag: playing to be the greatest philanthropist. SBF promised to donate his expected billions of profits from his crypto business to charity. He is quoted many times saying his goal of wanting to help other people aroused his appetite for financial risks. The FTX Foundation claims to have donated 190 million US dollars. SBF wanted to be seen as an effective altruist. Effective altruism is a philosophical movement that advocates doing the most good possible. One could easily find tons of SBF interviews and features where he is presented as this rich guy who will give all his fortunes away. My goal is to put myself in a position where I'll be able to donate almost everything that I make. Brief sidetrack. I especially hated this video by Nas Daily. The first time I saw this, I smelled something fishy. My bullshit detector said either this is 100% true and that SBF will give his billions away because he is that good of a person, or that this is nothing more than just a PR stunt, something to cover up something, or something to compensate for something. My final verdict? I think SBF really thinks he's doing something quote-unquote good. Why do I say so? CoinDesk has this article which might explain the parents' involvement on why SBF was being SBF. It provides a different angle which might help explain why SBF was acting and talking in such a manner. Go read this article. In addition to this, the YouTube channel Patrick Boyle has a video explaining the possible involvement of the parents. And he has a very funny line about this. Quote, "Now look, I'm a parent and understand getting involved in encouraging your kids' hobbies. Luckily for me, my kids' hobbies are music and tennis. If your kids' hobbies are large-scale financial fraud, money laundering, bribing politicians, and League of Legends, you have to possibly encourage new things." End quote. Lol. So yeah, by also being this guy who seemingly is willing to give away all of his money, SBF created an image of a rich philanthropist and that he showed as if he didn't care about money. Kinda weird though. Despite all this careful creation of a philanthropist image, not caring about money, he still lived in an expensive compound together with his people, sometimes ordering takeouts worth $500 every night. From a Bloomberg feature on SBF, quote, "He created this image that he did not care about money. He really liked to play up his monk lifestyle. And this place where he lived did not fit with that, because he's living in a penthouse at like the nicest resort in the Bahamas. He didn't buy a Lamborghini, but like he did fly in private jets. He had fancy penthouse. They paid 30 million bucks for it." End quote. The funny thing about all of this is, after the FTX collapse, it was reported that some of the recipients of the charity either received parts of the promised amounts of the donation, and some didn't even get one single dime, while those that received the money are now feeling guilty about the money that some of them are considering ridding themselves of the fund. Looking at this retrospectively, it seems SBF was maybe using effective altruism as somewhat of a white coat to make himself look like a saint. That the Crypto King provided cash to the movement's biggest groups, while the EA movement, as it's known, gave an intellectual and moral sheen to the SBF persona and directed the spotlight away from his business. Sam hides behind altruism, one former FTX employee told Forbes. He's quite aware of the front that he puts on. Second red flag: cosplaying the eccentric genius. Before the crash, the internet and media loved SBF and how he presented himself. That's not an overstatement. SBF didn't have the same look the way traditional tech bros and business people or finance men appeared. Formal clothes, suits, and ties. His messy hair, his choice of clothing, they were all carefully crafted to create this image of unconventionality, an image of youth and relatability, and most importantly, an image of an eccentric genius similar to those tech geniuses people worship. Jobs, Gates, Zuckerberg, Holmes. I'm kidding. From a Bloomberg feature on SBF, quote, "The kinda like crazy gigantic mop of curly hair, the t-shirts that are like half-fitting him, the cargo shorts, the fact that he looks like he hasn't showered for a couple of days, and a normal financier looks at that and says, oh man, that seems like a red flag. But like in the mind of venture capitalists, right? That is proof that he's so smart, he doesn't care." End quote. SBF also loved giving interviews, and he appeared as this verbose yet thoughtful and deep character. In the otherwise secretive world of crypto, where the owners of the exchanges are camera shy, Bankman-Fried stands out welcoming the publicity. SBF gave out a lot of interviews and talks that it was so easy to look for materials I needed for this video. And the FTX followers and the media liked him a lot because of this. To a point, some even worshipped what he said and did. And that, SBF was presented as like the smart guy who is going to change the world. No wonder why SBF was able to become the cover face for some of the big mainstream media outlets. Most of the media, online and traditional, lauded SBF whatever he said or did. SBF was knighted. He was crowned. And he was baptized as a wonder kid. And a genius. All because he looked so different from traditional finance people. Besides the fact that SBF was young and growing his wealth fast. However, time passed, and time proved SBF was far from this bro genius influencer who was all about crypto and changing the world with his ideas and beliefs. His empire started to crumble, and so did his well-crafted image. In fact, though, these people were putting on an act, an impression. They leveraged credentials, relationships, and theatrical self-representations to create what you might call a dumb person's idea of what a smart person looked like. This helped attract huge amounts of money. SBF thought he could talk his way out from this momentous failure. But obviously he could not. His house of cards still collapsed despite him talking a lot, and people started seeing him for what he really was. Sam believed he can talk his way out of this, only to have himself eviscerated, not necessarily by other people, but by his own words most of all. There's just something poetic about that. Politico has a great quote that describes well this desire of crafting an image. Real authenticity is not rooted in a desire to be authentic, said a founder in Silicon Valley who ignored investment queries from FTX. When you see this desire, you get people like Sam Bankman-Fried and Elizabeth Holmes, who become obsessed with their unique image as their primary asset. End quote. Later in interviews and during his trial, SBF claims ignorance when asked about what was happening to the funds, saying he wasn't entirely sure what was happening and that he wished he had better understanding. Gone is the boy genius. He said his understanding at the time was that there were teams that were managing this process, and that he says he didn't even know about the $8 billion hole in his company. Gone is the wonder kid. Think about this. At first, he was this willing participant who would tell almost anything to everyone. Now, he's just this guy who seems to not know things. Or that he's just a guy who got caught up in the middle of the shitstorm. After this collapse in his sentencing, SBF effectively killed the genius entrepreneur founder image, in my opinion. Investors will surely now be more careful next time another eccentric character comes asking for money. Here's an interesting quote from the eccentric genius SBF about reading a book. I'm very skeptical of books. I don't want to say no book is ever worth reading, but I actually do believe something pretty close to that, SBF explains. I think if you wrote a book, you fucked up, and it should have been a 6-paragraph blog post. End quote. That belief on books should tell you a lot about this genius. Third red flag, the try-hard influential man. As mentioned earlier, SBF tried buying influence, either in pop culture or in politics. SBF spent over $10 million backing Joe Biden's presidential campaign. In 2022 alone, he spent over $40 million on campaigns. He also gave $1 million to the Senate Majority PAC and $6 million to the House Majority PAC. Two super PACs that are dedicated to keeping the Congress in the hands of Democrats. When asked what SBF told her about spending money in politics, Caroline Ellison said, quote, "He said he thought it was very effective, that you could get very high returns in terms of influence by spending relatively small amounts of money." End quote. SBF admitted himself he donated to both the Democrats and the Republicans. In his phone interview with Tiffany Fong, SBF said, quote, "I donated to both parties. I donated about the same amount to both parties this year. That was not generally known because for some reason, in fact, no one can possibly fathom the idea that someone in practice actually gave dark. All my Republican donations were dark. People won't see them. And the reason wasn't for regulatory reasons. It's because reporters all freak the fuck out if you donate to a Republican, because they're all super liberal and didn't want to have that fight, so I made all the Republican ones dark." End quote. Of course, one cannot forget the deals struck with big-name sports teams and athletes, where once again, money rolled in to get them on in FTX's side, on the side of SBF. As for the philanthropy side, his donations to groups, I guess I'll scrape the bottom of the barrel here and say that these donations too would have greatly impacted his image as a person, which would surely make him look the part of an influential man that can hand out big donations to charity every time he wanted to. So yeah, if those mentioned don't sound like buying influence, I don't know what is. Fourth red flag. Try hard, savior. And I guess I can include this as a red flag too. SBF trying to be the savior of either the crypto world or the world itself in general. From a Politico article. Sam cares about ideas. He cares about ideas that make the world a better place. Now, that sounds trite, but without naming names, I think a lot of large donors don't. They care about supporting their tribe, whatever it is, said Gabe Bankman-Fried, Sam's younger brother. Remember effective altruism? This greatly influenced SBF. In the simplest explanation I can give, effective altruism says go become a billionaire and become as powerful as you can and start donating to anything that can have bigger positive impact and social change instead of donating to things that has lesser impact or no impact on the lives of the many. From a Vice article, quote, Bankman-Fried has not just been described as a savior of crypto by his financial backers, but canonized as a man who would somehow save the world as the face of the effective altruism movement favored by Silicon Valley elites. End quotes. This makes me think though. During the time when crypto business were collapsing and FTX helped out some of these businesses, did SBF think that saving these companies meant causing greater good for the greater number of people, including within his company, knowing very well that by helping out these dying businesses, the problem could spread within their own company? I am not making light of effective altruism, but I guess during those catastrophic events was supposed to be a time when a board of adults, which FTX didn't have in their leadership, stood up and say, "Hey, you know what, Sam? It's not really a good move for our business to hand out money to these companies, or to those politicians, or to those groups, or it's not safe to take customer funds from our businesses and using them as your personal fund to fund your ideals. Not really a good move." There's this long blog post that really is the best example of what I'm trying to explain here about SBF trying to be this savior of sorts. It's now on the Wayback Machine. Not surprised. It's a piece from Sequoia Capital, and the article is called Sam Bankman-Fried Has a Savior Complex, and maybe you should too. It was obviously written to make SBF look more bigger and I guess more legendary. Links in the description below. There's a lot of story to unpack in that blog post, but I do want to highlight only one small thing from it. Something from the blog post which kinda made me laugh, knowing this was supposed to make SBF look good. And it's something which I think is the best analogy to the SBF story. It's about his gaming. Quote, during his teenage gaming years, his mathematical abilities allowed him to sharpen his tactics and win. End quote. So, if SBF has these sharpened tactics, why then was SBF so bad at League of Legends that Elon Musk and Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez made fun of him? Couldn't SBF apply the same mathematical abilities to carry a game, be the savior of the team, and earn a high rank on League? SBF's rank on League, by the way, was Bronze 3, the second lowest rank. So, yeah. I wonder why he couldn't hire a coach to help himself become better at the game. Bruh, he had the money and time obviously. Or does his savior complex prevent him in realizing that he sucks at the game? I think this part of SBF's story is the best analogy to really describe FTX collapse. Having the means and resources to hire a coach and help with his game, or even pay high-ranked players to help boost his rank. Kids, don't do this, that's bad. But still, not using these resources because maybe his savior complex prevents him to do so. That, SBF and FTX had all the means and resources to hire competent people who could have helped steer their ship on safer waters. Instead, their ship crashed for all the world to see because SBF failed to hire a credible and competent crew, because maybe he thought he can save it all. From a Financial Times feature on SBF, quote, one big VC investor, Chamat Palihapatiya, says that he was approached about putting some money to work in FTX, and he said, okay, look, this is interesting. There's a few things we'd want you to do differently. We'd want you to have a board. We'd want you to have some sort of oversight. And he says the response from FTX was, quotes, go fuck yourself. End quotes. If SBF could not carry a game and be the savior of his team on League, and that's why he is stuck in bronze, what more for his business? I know there's no correlation between your rank in game and the success of your business, or maybe there is if we are talking about paying to win. But the point I want to make is that he had the resources to use to improve both his league rank and his business activities. So why not use them? Wasn't he supposed to be this guy whose mathematical abilities allowed him to sharpen his tactics and win? Where again is the sharpened tactics he used to win, both in league and in business? The irony is not lost in me. Remember, he's also like this guy who was playing League while on a meeting asking investors for their money. The blog post to make SBF look good was written for the same company of investors. It was so highly reported that during a pitch meeting between SBF and Sequoia Capital, SBF was caught playing League. Then later, reports say Sequoia Capital invested on FTX, on SBF. The venture capital firm invested a total of $213.5 million in FTX and FTX US. Little did they know, as Cold Fusion beautifully puts it, they'll never see this money again. The Bronze 3 is not the savior as he was portrayed to be. The Bronze 3 fucked up. Chapter 3: The Aftermath. Despite all the image building, influence buying, and media interviews free, on November 2, 2023, SBF was convicted of fraud and conspiracy on all 7 counts. SBF was found guilty of stealing billions of dollars from accounts belonging to customers of FTX. He was also found guilty of defrauding lenders to FTX's sister company, Alameda Research, which held FTX customer funds in a bank account. On the 15th day of his trial, a decision was reached after less than 5 hours of deliberation by a jury of 9 women and 3 men, who found SBF guilty on all charges. 2 counts of wired fraud, 4 counts of conspiracy to commit fraud, and 1 count of conspiracy to commit money laundering. SBF could be facing up to 115 years of prison time. A tentative sentencing date was set for March 28, 2024. As for the users and investors of FTX, maybe this result was somewhat of a light tap on their shoulders to show them that justice will be served. Conclusion. So, did SBF fake it till he made it? Like I said earlier, it's not that simple. It is quite hard to say. Though some people imply that he did, I can't also remove myself from the observation that SBF seemed to have a very strong conviction on his ideas and actions. That it seems he strongly believes he was doing the right thing. He believed on them so strongly that, maybe, the question of morality was thrown out because they were nothing more than hindrances towards the greater good. It's just like the regulations that SBF tried changing to benefit his company. These regulations are seen as hindrances to the advancement of Web3 and crypto. And that may be all the things he said and did, SBF, may be believed were for the greater good, and so he must say them, or that he must act on them, disregarding the moral implications of his words and actions, since everything was for the greater good anyway. The question I ask myself then is, for whose greater good were all those things he did? For the people? Or SBF's? If there's one thing simple in all of this story, it's that SBF surely committed crimes. This is Alan D, and if you reached this part of the video, thank you for listening.